Diptyque Laurent is with us now in studio to take us through what's making headlines in the French papers. Diptyque, I believe we're going to start with a third round of protesting here in France against the government's labour reforms.
That's right, Eve. The backlash continues against the government's proposed reforms on labour, on inheritance taxes, and a whole host of other changes that Emmanuel Macron wants to bring into France. France's major union, the CGT union, will be leading today's demonstrations. Excuse me. Among their grievances, according to L'Humanité, the communist paper, the ease of hiring and firing workers and less importance that could be given to workers' unions who are there to protect employees. And the paper also accuses the government of trying to do away with some key work committees that are in place in companies with more than 50 employees to ensure the health, the security and well-being of workers. The government's focus on pushing through reforms by decree will result in, quote, catastrophic losses for employees and their well-being at work.
And people are also quite angry about proposed changes to the inheritance tax.
Well, this is particularly controversial because it sort of plays into this critique that Emmanuel Macron has been facing pretty much since he became president, that he's a president of the rich, much like the same criticism that was leveled against Nicolas Sarkozy. Now, Macron's idea is to reduce inheritance taxes, in some cases completely eliminate inheritance taxes for the top earners in France so that they could be encouraged to reinvest these savings into French startups, into French companies, generate wealth and jobs. For Libération, well, they don't really see it that way. They actually called on the government yesterday to make public a report into the impact of these reforms on the top earners in France, which the government has refused to do. So there's a sort of standoff now. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire has said he's, quote, surprised by what he calls a manhunt, adding, I quote, should these people who are rich enough to pay wealth taxes be publicly denounced. So you really get an idea of how the government sees it. Opposition MPs have said it's not a question of publicly denouncing anyone, but rather looking at the system and seeing if it's promoting inequalities, at least social inequalities. Anyway, the debate will be continued in Parliament later today.
Okay, meanwhile, another thing has actually been passed now, I believe, into law. It's the security question. France trying to move away from this state of emergency and really putting a lot of those measures into law.
And that's why it was so controversial, because critics say that the what's now become a law actually chips away at the rights of individuals, in particular their freedom of movement, their freedom of speech, that kind of thing. Gérard Collomb, who is France's interior minister, has given an interview to a local paper here in which he's promised that the government will be present on all fronts, including security or concerning security. The government has announced a daily life police unit. It's a return of the police de proximité, or the neighborhood police, the ones that sort of go into difficult neighborhoods and mingle with the locals. These local police units were actually dismantled under Nicolas Sarkozy, but Macron has said the police will be reinstated, but they're not there to, I quote, play football with young people in the neighborhood. That's what he said yesterday. Interestingly, these are the exact same words that Nicolas Sarkozy said many years ago.
Okay, I wonder what we can read into that. Well, let's move on to a more positive French news story now. And French scientists have made a significant discovery in what causes or may cause dyslexia.
That's right. It's a really important discovery because dyslexia is a debilitating disorder in which a person essentially jumbles up words and numbers and has problems reading. And it, according to Le Monde, it affects 700 million people around the world. That is enormous. Now, two French researchers think they may have found the cause of dyslexia. Basically, they link it to a malformation in a very minuscule part of the eye. So in people who don't have dyslexia, the zone is asymmetrical, which means that it's uneven, meaning that the brain chooses the dominant eye and sends a signal to the dominant eye, and that's what we're seeing. Now, among dyslexic people, they believe that this could be symmetrical, which means there's no dominant eye, and hence the confusion in sending images from the brain to the eyes. They're proposing now a special lamp that could actually help dyslexic people, and even say possibly it could be diagnosed with a simple eye test.
Okay, a special lamp, that would be a pretty simple solution then, or glasses. Fascinating stuff. Finally, to end on a story, there's a British man launching a Kickstarter campaign because he wants to honour the first cat that went to space.
That's right. It was a French cat, actually, Eve. Her name was Félicette. She was a black and white stray cat found wandering the streets of Paris. Now, a Brit called Matthew Serge Guy wants the whole world to know about the contribution that Félicette gave to science and ultimately paid her life for it. She was sent into space on October the 18th, 1963. She was sent in the Véronique rocket, which was launched from the Sahara Desert. She was shot up 157 kilometers into space and spent 5 minutes in this sort of weightlessness atmosphere. She actually survived the experiment, and worth noting, she was chosen after a rigorous test among 18 other cats. Anyway, she was examined by scientists for 2 months and then put down so they could examine the effects of the journey on her body. So you can see she literally gave her body to science. That's why this young Brit now wants a statue built in her honor. If he gets $45,000 on Kickstarter, a sculptor has agreed to build the statue for Félicette, the first space kitty.
Okay, Deputy Laurent with the French Press Review. Thanks a lot for that. Time for us now to take a quick break, but still to come this hour. While the question over independence in Catalonia